going to start with those Sacramento Kings as they're 8-2 through their last 10. And with De'Aaron Fox back in the lineup, they look more like the team that we thought they were going to be. There was a little bit of early season panic, but De'Aaron Fox was out. They were without an all-NBA caliber player, and a little bit of that panic was unwarranted, and they're showing that now. We'll start with you, Reek. How have you felt about the Sacramento Kings so far? And now that De'Aaron Fox is back, they look pretty much as good as they did last year.
I think that's the obvious thing. It was De'Aaron being out. But, what I mentioned before the season, why I still thought the Kings could be a playoff team was the continuity that they had built last season, that culture that sit in once Mike Brown came in. And they brought in, Sabonis, Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter, and those guys. I just felt like things like that might translate over, even though they were one of the healthiest teams last season. They were one of the best offenses of all time, shot the ball well. I thought that can translate over. Early on in the season, their shooters, Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, those guys were struggling. Like we talked about it, those guys were bottom 5 shooters percentage-wise for their volume in the league. And on top of De'Aaron Fox being out, that's tailor-made for you to struggle against the teams that they were playing against, like the Houston Rockets, beat them back-to-back games, which kind of jump-started their early success this season. But De'Aaron being out, the engine that he is, the step that he's taken this season, he's gotten even better. That's going to take a toll on you. It's going to make it more difficult on Sabonis. And then when your shooters are already struggling, they're not getting those easy catch-and-shoot looks from De'Aaron's penetration at the rim. It's tough. That's just tailor-made for this team to struggle. But since De'Aaron has been back, this team has looked miles better. They've been, winning, like you said, 8 out of 10. They've been playing great basketball. And, there's really no reason why they can't be a team that's super competitive in the Western Conference during the regular season again. Just because the step that De'Aaron has taken, I think Keegan Murray's looked a lot better this season. He looks like a little more fluid, a little more confident offensively since he's gotten out of that shooting slump. And, look, Sabonis, he's going to do what he does in the regular season too. This team's still – in a very competitive middle pack of the Western Conference. They're a team that I have a lot of confidence in because it seems like that offense is still as high quality as it was last season. And De'Aaron Fox, as a star player, has taken another leap so far this season. So I hope that continues for him because, he's definitely deserving of like an all-NBA spot. He's averaging almost 30 points a game, so he's been amazing.
Yeah, I think they're essentially just as good as they were last year. If you just look at some of the stats around them, they're only the 12th ranked offense this year. But if you look at those numbers just in the games De'Aaron Fox has played, it's 3rd in the NBA. So really, they took a massive hit with him being out. And that's where half their losses came from, too. 3 out of their 6 losses this year were all those, 5 games that De'Aaron missed. So, and just when their best players on the court, they're still a very good team. And for them to still be that good, even with, the early season shooting slumps of some of their guys, it just shows this offense has that ability to really rebound and really just keep on keeping on no matter what's thrown against them. And I expect them to keep being good as the rest of the season goes. If you look at Sabonis this year, he's pretty much doing the exact same thing he did last year, which good in the regular season, may have some questions in the playoffs, but right now we're just talking about right now. If they just keep doing what they did last year, I think it's still going to be a recipe for success. We see in games last night, they looked really down and out of it, but that offense got hot, and at the end of the day, they ended up coming out with that crucial win against Golden State. So they look good. The other thing, I hope they keep feeding Malik Monk. Seen some good things out of him. Obviously, the really clutch basket last night. I saw in games that they win, he averages 15 versus games where they lose, he averages 11, which you might call that kind of minor, only 4-point, but I think a 4-point swing, that's a pretty big deal. So it shows the more you get him involved and the more he's active in what they're doing, the better they even get. So really the keys for them is just going to be De'Aaron Fox just staying steady, staying on the court, just Malik Monk, get him more involved, and then as these shooting slumps continue to just go out the window and these guys get back to form, they should be very good going forward for the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys mentioned, De'Aaron Fox being back and how well he's played is essential. And most of what they do on the offensive end is predicated on De'Aaron Fox and his play style. They have a ton of really good shooters. And without that dribble penetration from Fox, without that respect that he commands from opposing defenses, it is really tough for them to get into what they want to get into. I mean, Sabonis gives them some of that, but it is very limited compared to how dynamic De'Aaron is at getting downhill and getting to the rim. So him being out, of course, was going to affect things, and they've looked very good since then. The three-point shooting, as we've mentioned, has been an issue compared to last year. It's gotten much better, but even still, like you alluded to, Gabe, that's part of why they're still not quite at that same type of elite tier offense as they were last year. They're not quite in the top 10 on the year yet. Of course, better when De'Aaron's been on the court. But an interesting thing is that their defense hasn't been terrible this year by any stretch. They're currently 18th in defensive rating, which is not amazing, but considering they were typically a bottom 5 defense for most of last year, and obviously previous Kings teams before that have historically been that, that's a bit of a sign of improvement as well. We'll see how that continues, but if they can hover around a middle of the pack defense, this makes this team a little bit more interesting once their offense gets clicking a little bit more, and you get guys like Keegan Murray that are just hitting threes again, and Kevin Huerter's starting to hit threes again. Trey Lyles is now back in the lineup the last few games, so that's another three-point shooting source and a good piece off the bench. So I like what I'm seeing there. Like we've mentioned, De'Aaron's been great. He's been even better than last year. Another interesting note as far as Sabonis goes, the mid-range has looked better this year. I don't know if that's going to continue, but it's looked better. He's shooting more of them and he's hitting more of them. 37% of his shots this year are from mid-range. That's up from 25% last year. And he's shooting 46%, or pardon me, 54% on those mid-ranges, which is the 91st percentile in the league for bigs. So he is getting more mid-range shots. He's a bit more aggressive there. He's hitting more of them this year. That's up only from 53% on mid-range last year. So the efficiency isn't going up that much, but he is a lot more aggressive there this year. That's something that hopefully we see a little bit more of come the postseason. That's going to be the biggest thing for him, because we know there was a bit of an issue last year in terms of injury with the shooting hand, but that limited him, and that was the biggest downfall to him. If he can start to hit that 12, 15, 18-footer, Mike doesn't want to behave, but if we can start seeing that from Sabonis, this opens up a lot for this Kings offense. You get a lot more actions that him and Fox can get involved in. You get a lot of more dribble hands-offs that you can get other guys involved in, whether it's Huerter, whether it's Keegan, whether it's Monk. Lots opens up, especially for them in the postseason. So that's the biggest thing I want to continue to watch. The shooting has been and will continue to correct himself. They have talented shooters on this team. So if Sabonis can hit that mid-range a little bit more consistently and the defense can be better like it's been, this opens up a lot more avenues for them going into the postseason.
Yeah.
I like that point.
Real quick, I just want to highlight for them as well, what I think makes them still legit is like this team was one of the best road teams in the NBA last year. And in this like recent stretch they've had where they really got back to form, they've really continued a lot of that good road play as well. Like they had some struggles in New Orleans. They lost to them twice in a row there. But outside of that, they've still done very well there. And any team that travels well is usually going to be a pretty good team, because we know how they are about lighting the beam at home. But if they're going to continue to travel as well as they do, and they're only 5-5 right now, but I do think like 3 of those were the 3 losses with Fox out. So still traveling very well, and that's going to really set them up for success.
Yeah, because they lost, I think, back-to-back in Houston.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, that's a pretty decent amount. Back to the Sabonis point about the mid-range, even if it's not like a potent part of his game right now, it's good that he's taking those, because you gotta make the defense respect you. And with this team, we're thinking about later on when it's like April, it's playoff basketball. You got to be some type of a threat if you can't just bully ball your way in the paint, because he tried it in the playoffs last year, it didn't work, and that's pretty much been a thing in his entire career. You see guys like Bam, Embiid, Jokic, Sengun, like these guys are all pretty good mid-range players. Some of them are like top of the top in the league, like Embiid, Jokic. But if he could just become a threat, that'll definitely help him out a lot, and it'll help this team out a lot once they get into the playoffs.
Definitely. I'm very much looking forward to what we can see from Sabonis in there. Like you said, there's a lot of these bigs like that are getting to that point, and especially when this Kings team is predicated on their shooting, is predicated on their spacing. When Sabonis gives them that extra layer of that, doesn't have to be from the three-point line, but when they can get that extra layer, just opens up that much more for them, allows their offense to be a lot more open. And that's ultimately what's going to win them games. I mean, the defense hopefully gets better and continues to be a little bit better, but ultimately this offense needs to continue to be elite for them to win games. So any way they can continue to get better at that, although difficult because they are already very good, any way they can get better at that's only going to help them.
I don't know if you guys saw my tweet earlier. This is like, it's still Kings, but it's off topic about this season. But I was thinking about like, because I think I was watching Sengun's interview on Paul George's podcast, and he was saying like he thought the Kings were going to draft him. I'm like, oh, that would be interesting, because at the time It took Davion Mitchell, who's pretty much out of the rotation now, and they already had De'Aaron, they had Tyrese. I was just thinking, like, just say they draft Şengün so they don't make the Sabonis trade, right? And then just say, like, the win-loss record is pretty much the same as it was that season because they were bad when they made the trade for Sabonis and they didn't finish the season great. So we'll just assume they're in that 4 or 5 range and they draft Keegan Murray. That would be a really fun, like, core right there. Like, De'Aaron, Tyrese, who's shown that he could play with or without the basketball, Keegan Murray on the wing, Şengün in the front court. I think that could be interesting. It would have been fun, but obviously I think the Kings are still happy with the position they're in. But, they could have set themselves up nice that way too if they would have drafted Şengün.
Yeah, I saw that. And hopefully, I mean, in that potential what if, like, if they would have just given him the same opportunity, because, like, the Rockets were bad, so it was easy to get opportunities there. But, like, the Kings weren't too good either. So I know they still had, like, Rashawn Holmes on the roster. I can't remember who else they really had running the 5. But, like, assuming they give him the opportunity to show what he does, I mean, he's basically just a light version of Sabonis. And I don't even know if it's really that light anymore. Like, they're pretty dang close in terms of production this season. So that'd be a hell of a thing. Really, I'm excited for the Kings going forward, though. I really think, like, those concerns about Sabonis and the jump shooting and all that, like, it's really going to come down to the question of playoff production because we've seen throughout his career, and especially last year, it really ended up selling them in the end. Like, De'Aaron, his game translated perfectly to that level, and he only continues to progress as a shooter. But that Sabonis aspect, like, it might put a ceiling on them. And that's definitely a real concern, but, like, it's not something I can really speak on now because he was so good last regular season as well. But if he can continue to expand his game and it's, like, the same production but more dynamic ways of getting those numbers up, that's going to make a big difference for them, like you guys said.
For sure. We'll definitely keep monitoring that, but Kings keep having regular season success, and we haven't seen this for them for a long time. So, like you said, Reek, despite the fact that they could have had those guys in a core, which would have been very fun, I'd imagine at this point they're still pretty happy with where they're at, and they're more than happy to keep having regular season success. So we'll see what the future holds with Sabonis in the postseason, and more potential decisions down the line could come from that. But I'm thinking they're pretty happy with their success for the time being.